In lieu of the FDA releasing a statement on August 6th, 2025, depending on when you're listening to this, regarding the safety of natural desiccated thyroid products or ADT or animal derived thyroid products, including but not limited to Armour Thyroid, NP Thyroid, WP Thyroid, compounded T4 and T3 medications using a porcine derived thyroid glandular or supplements that contain a porcine or bovine derived thyroid glandular like that is in my thyroid glandular by the fixer and many other supplements just like that. Basically, the FDA is announcing that manufacturers, patients, doctors have 12 months to transition you over from these NDT products that might be working just fine to keep you optimized into the synthetics or the biosynth. Now we're going to break that down today of synthroid or levothyroxine or cytomel or liothyronine. So basically a transition has to be made for you to move from your natural desiccated thyroid products over to T4 and T3 separated out in the levo or the lyo forms. Now, what I want to do today is give you a few things to really think about. Number one, the precedent that this could set for other medications, such as bioidentical hormones or BHRT. And then I also want to go into a little bit of the history of thyroid medications so that we can better understand it and possibly wrap our minds around the motive of the FDA to do this exactly. Now, whenever it comes to our government and their motives, one might not ever know what the true motive is behind any of their actions. But what I do know is that whenever the federal government, and this comes directly from many people I know that work for the federal government, whenever the federal government actually puts out a statement and says that they are doing something for the greater good, or especially for, let's say, your health, you have to let some bells go off in your head, maybe ringing a warning signal that there's something else underlying this. There's just something else going on because the federal government never does anything that would cost them money in order to preserve your health. Let's just face it, shall we? Now, let's actually first review the letter so that we can better understand exactly what it's saying, and then we can dissect it. We'll go into the history, and then, of course, the precedent this is setting because it could extend into the removal of medications that work for you, like bioidentical hormones. If we look at the FDA's letter that they released to healthcare providers, patients, and of course, manufacturers, and we break this down. So let's break down the most important parts of this here. So, first, they go into hypothyroidism, what it is. Millions of Americans take thyroid hormone replacement medication to treat hypothyroidism. We obviously know that millions are also undiagnosed, so they don't even have an accurate number of those people diagnosed with hypothyroidism, but there are many out there that are still undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. And they state that currently there are two types of thyroid hormone replacement medications on the market available only by prescription. The most commonly used type of therapy is synthetic or laboratory made medications containing only levothyroxine or liothyronine or a combination of the two. Now, quite frankly, I do not know of any synthetic medication that combines those two. So that's odd that they actually have that in there. An estimated 22 million patients receive prescriptions for Levo dispensed by US outpatient retail pharmacies in 2024. Now, the reason this number is so high is because, as we know, standard of care in conventional medicine is T4 only or T4 monotherapy. I joke all the time that doctors are taught, conventional medicine is taught that you test TSH. If TSH is above a 4.5, you give that patient T4, you pat them on the back, you shove them out your door, you say, good luck. We're going to see you in 6 months, and that's when we'll retest you. Meanwhile, you're still suffering with weight gain and hair loss and constipation and brain fog and the like, but they don't care. T4 is standard of care. In fact, they don't even care or might not even diagnose you if your TSH is less than 4.5, but you still have all of the hypothyroid symptoms because they're not looking beyond that TSH, which in and of itself is a disastrous consequence to many hypothyroid patients, thus more being misdiagnosed and told that they're fine, everything is normal. But that's not the point of this podcast. We mentioned that enough, don't we? So moving on, they're estimating 22 million patients receiving prescriptions for T4 only. That's not hard to believe. Again, because conventional medicine is so boxed into the Synthroid box or the T4 only box as standard of care. I know this even from my experience. I've spoken about my own personal journey and how I literally handed Dr. Google papers from my gateway computer way back then to the one doctor out of 7 that actually got the diagnosis right, who then put me on T4, which did not work for 5 months. I took it for 5 months. There was zero change in symptoms, zero. And I went back to her and I said, there's this other thyroid hormone called T3. Why don't we add that in? And she said, I don't do that. That's not standard of care. Now, based on the thousands and thousands of patients that we have treated in our clinical practice, our telehealth clinical practice, yeah, that is standard of care. And I would say that the majority, well, there is a stat that I often throw out, 2% do well on, I use air quotes, do well on T4 only, 98% need T4 and T3. Now, of that 2% that do well on T4 only, I would argue in practice or in my clinic, in our clinic, where we see thousands of patients because we prescribe to all 50 states and parts of Canada. Do you know how many patients come through our door? Do you know how many people that we have optimized with their thyroid? Thousands, tens of thousands. Of that, I can honestly and accurately say that 0% do well on T4 only. That's why they're coming to us, to get out of the conventional medicine standard of care system of T4 monotherapy that doesn't work. 0% do well on T4 only. 98% need T4 and T3. Now, all of these stats and everything that we're talking about, I'm setting you up for knowledge when we go into the history. It's really going to make you think like, "Ooh, okay, I'm following this money trail. What's going on?" All right, let's keep going with the FDA's letter. These medications have been FDA approved for decades and are marketed as branded and generic medications containing levothyroxine sodium or liothyronine sodium. FDA approved. Now, it's important to note that the FDA approval process takes years. This is not a fast process. 2, 3, 5 years to become FDA approved as a drug manufacturer. Important to note that. We'll come back to that. So the second type of therapy, available only by prescription, is animal-derived thyroid medication, sometimes called desiccated thyroid extract or DTE. We also call it NDT or natural desiccated thyroid. These medications are marketed as Armour Thyroid, NP Thyroid. They have Nature-Throid in here, but we know Nature-Throid was pulled, and Natural Thyroid, among other names. These medications are produced from dried, ground animal thyroid glands, usually porcine from a pig. Animal-derived thyroid medications are not FDA approved, yet an estimated 1.5 million patients receive prescriptions for these medications from U.S. outpatient retail pharmacies in 2024. So they are not including the compounded T4 and T3 medications that millions also receive. So we are estimating between 1.5 and 4 million Americans are on natural desiccated thyroid medication. Now, okay, when you compare it to 22 million receiving prescriptions for Levo, yeah, there's a difference in those numbers. However, 4 million people or more, if we're underestimating here, are going to suffer if we pull their medication that is working to give them quality of life and to optimize their thyroid. Let's keep going. Due to their complex biological origin, these medications contain many compounds that are uncharacterized for safety and effectiveness. Now, let's see here. Complex biological origin. So this is the section of this letter that gives me pause, that tells me that if this goes through, and we're going to keep going with this, but if this goes through, what's next? Is it going to be bioidentical progesterone, bioidentical estradiol, bioidentical testosterone? Are compounding pharmacies going to be shut down and and banned from making your bioidentical hormone replacement therapy in a compounded form? Are we going to be forced to use things like birth control or synthetic hormones because they want us to move over to the synthetics here with thyroid medication? Do we want to move over to the synthetic hormones as well? Now, it is important to stop and take note here. I want to clarify. By no way, shape, or form do I feel that the synthetic thyroid medications like Levo and Lyo are a problem. They're not. In fact, I've often referred to them as biosynth, like bioidentical yet synthetic and manufactured in a lab, biosynth, because they are, even though they are manufactured, they are bioidentical to what our thyroid gland produces. They're really damn close, let's say. And I know with many of our patients, including myself, we do really well on these proper combinations of biosynth. In fact, when we're looking at natural desiccated thyroid, I would say the majority of my patients do a little bit better on the biosynth than the NDT for a variety of factors, including the fact that natural desiccated thyroid medication is roughly 80% T4 and 20% T3. As we've already discussed, T4 is the inactive thyroid hormone. It has to convert and become T3, the active thyroid hormone. That process is a rigorous process in the body. Many people have issues converting. Many people have issues with elevated reverse T3. So while they may be doing well on NDT, we often add T3 to that mix, liothyronine to that mix, to even just change that 80-20 ratio, to give them a little bit more of the active thyroid hormone and keep the inactive thyroid hormone low so as not to increase the reverse T3. But the most important thing here is options and personalization. I have always said that my favorite thyroid medication is the one that works for you in the combination that works for you in the dose that works for you. And if we limit your choices and your options to two, meaning Levo or Lyo, and they have various forms and brand names kind of stretching out, expanding from the base, but the base is T4 and T3 separated out. You deserve options. You deserve the medical freedom to have options. And when we get into the historical perspective, it's kind of going to blow your mind a little bit. So the FDA is concerned with these unapproved, I'm using air quotes here, unapproved thyroid medications, is that number one, tablets made from the same manufacturing batches may not always provide the same thyroid hormone levels. Inconsistent doses have serious consequences for patients. Too much medication can cause unwanted side effects, and too little could not be effective. Now, I agree with that statement. However, yes, there might be slight variances from one tablet or one lot to the other, but these are often rigorously tested. And just like any recall on your car, on your food, on your Tylenol, or even most recently on your levothyroxine, that's supposed to be the holy freaking grail, also recalled, things happen. Things happen in the manufacturing process, and that's why we catch it, we recall it, and we change it. Now, quite frankly, in my practice, seeing thousands, if not tens of thousands of patients, all of us, everyone in my practice, my nurse practitioners and the like, I have never seen a patient end up in the hospital in cardiac arrest from taking too much Armour, or from that Armour containing 10 times the amount of T3 and giving them heart palpitations. If the ratios are off slightly, maybe they're getting a little bit more T3. Oh, we even have reports saying, hey, I feel really good all of a sudden. What's this batch? But I have personally never, and maybe you're a practitioner out there listening to this and go, oh, well, I have never seen a person go hyperthyroid if they are being treated properly by a practitioner that knows what they're doing with the thyroid. If they're being treated properly, it's very, very rare, if it's not actually non-existent, that these people will go into a serious consequence situation and go into hyperthyroidism. Now, too little could not be effective. Okay, yeah. Absolutely. We want to be aware of that. But again, it's about choices. So if we currently have someone, or let's say you're listening to this and you are this person that's on natural desiccated thyroid medication, you're on Armour, And, all of a sudden a batch comes out and you're like, hey, wait a minute. I don't know what's happening, whether it's me or my medication. I'm feeling a little bit hypo all of a sudden. Well, that did happen back in 2008. And it happened to me. I was on Armour prior to moving to T3 only and discovering that I am T3 only. And it was like this process that Armour was working a little bit, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. And then there was a shortage/recall. That can happen. And once again, you catch it. You be aware of your body. You talk to your practitioner about it. Maybe you change lots. Maybe you get Armour from a different pharmacy, or we add in T3 until we figure out exactly what's going on with that particular medication. But I'm going to tell you, this can even happen with the generic T4 and T3. I've talked about this before. Your T4, your levothyroxine. There are a boatload of different generic manufacturers of levo. There are a boatload of different generic manufacturers of Lio or T3. And if you even change the generic manufacturer, let's say your pharmacy can no longer get T3 from Sigma Farm, so they change you over to Sun Pharmaceuticals. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. All of a sudden, I'm either a little bit too amped up or I'm a little bit too low. It can be the difference in the generic. And the generics are supposedly FDA approved. You're going to have these variations and these snafus in medication here and there. But if they are caught, we can adjust. And I would love to know the statistics or the cases from the FDA of people who have died from natural desiccated thyroid medication. Has anyone died? Has anyone gone into cardiac arrest? Has anyone needed like a pacemaker, right? Has anyone lost all of their bones to where they're just like walking down the street and breaking in two? Now we know that that's not even, it's not even a thing. T3 does not cause osteoporosis, right? Increasing a dose of NDT does not cause osteoporosis and AFib, but this is what they're scared of. So I'm playing into their fears, and I'm countering their fears with 0 cases. So the FDA sent letters to manufacturers, importers, and distributors of marketed, unapproved animal-derived thyroid medications on August 6, 2025. This letter notified them of the agency's intent to take action against unapproved animal-derived thyroid medication. Now, they say doctors will be able to work with their patients to safely transition them to an FDA-approved thyroid medication. Okay. Manufacturers, importers, and distributors of unapproved animal-derived thyroid medications may be subject to compliance action if they commercially distribute their unapproved products. Additionally, these unapproved animal-derived thyroid medications are not eligible for compounding because these products are registered as biological products under the Public Health Service Act. So that means that your compounded T4 and T3 are going bye-bye as well. So currently, biologics or biological products cannot be compounded. They're not eligible for the exemptions for compounded drugs under sections 503A and 503B of the FD&C Act. Federal law does not provide a legal pathway for marketing biologics that have been prepared outside the scope of an approved biologic license application. So again, that biologic term, that's where it gets a little bit scary, because what are they going to do? How are they going to classify our bioidentical hormones? If they're classifying compounded T4 and T3 from animal-derived thyroid glands, what are they going to do next? And that's really the message that I want you to consider, because you might be listening to this and saying, I'm not on NDT. It doesn't affect me. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I mean, you're probably not listening to this if you're one of those people that are never going to take care of themselves. They don't want to be on hormones. They're just going to, or you are just going to age and not care about supplementation or nutrient deficiencies or hormones protecting you from cancer and Alzheimer's and osteoporosis and all the things. You're not even listening to this podcast. So I'm not talking to you. Who I'm talking to are my health warriors out there that really actually give a shit about how they feel, and that they don't want to age gracefully. They want to age like a badass, including hormones and bioidentical hormone therapy. Now, let me take it one step further. Maybe there's a medication that's working for you, let's say for your migraines, or let's say there's a medication working for you for your, I don't know, your depression. Even though most antidepressants are band-aids, let's say you fall into that category that you really do have a clinical imbalance in your brain, and you finally found one that gave you quality of life. And then the FDA comes along and goes, yeah, um, sorry, you're going to have to transition off of that and go back to one of the other ones that you probably already tried that didn't work. Your quality of life is going in the toilet, in the toilet. So, yes, this does matter to you. This does extend beyond NDT medications. I mean, come on. We cannot be that blind in the last 5 years to notice and recognize that medications that work are being withheld from consumers being able to utilize it. Treatments that work, that are of low expense to the pharmaceutical industry, are being held, while other more extensive, more expensive, more side effect profile based medications are being pushed, or treatments that just flat out don't even work are being pushed. But we won't go there. We'll stay on the thyroid. So let's go into some history, shall we? Did you know that NDT was actually, it's the OG. It's the OG thyroid medication in the late 1800s. Desiccated thyroid extract, or NDT, was introduced as the first effective therapy for myxedema and hypothyroidism. So myxedema is that moon face, that swelling of your face. Oh goodness, I had that when I was being tossed around and misdiagnosed and on T4 only that didn't work. That nice round fat moon face, myxedema. And this can also occur in the arms. You know, when you have that like thickness occurring, it's like, oh, it's not fat. It's just this thick skin, edema under the skin. So they initially were drying out sheep thyroid glands, then they moved to pigs. And sources like Armour Thyroid came about in the 1930s. NDT delivered both T4 and T3 in proportions closer to the body's natural secretion. Through 1965, roughly 80% of thyroid prescriptions in the United States were NDT. 80%, reflecting both physician and patient reliance on its full spectrum hormone profile, meaning you got some T3 in there. 80%. And then synthetic T4 arrives, but it doesn't immediately win. So in the 1920s, T4 was successfully synthesized, but without modern lab tools. So dosing was blind, it was crude. NDT remained dominant because patients felt better. They felt better. Patients felt better. And physicians were really working with their patients at the time, dosing it on how they felt. Then the T4 monotherapy era begins. 1970s. Radioimmunoassays for TSH, meaning testing for TSH, T3, and T4 finally emerged, where doctors could monitor levels. But then many functional practitioners like myself argue, hey, number one, you're all saying that this peripheral conversion of T4 to the active T3 happens really easily in the tissues, but we know it's often impaired. We know stress, illness, inflammation, deiodinase polymorphisms, elevated cortisol, elevated insulin, estrogen dominance, iodine deficiency, magnesium deficiency, selenium deficiency will all impair that T4 to T3 conversion that conventional medicine thinks occurs so beautifully and so naturally and so easily. NDT actually was providing benefits to patients who didn't effectively convert T4 to T3. Now, we do have T3 that we can add in now as well. But again, it's all about choice. So then the NIH endorsed this T4 monotherapy. But functional medicine sees this as an oversimplified, one-size-fits-all approach that ignored downstream conversion issues and individual physiology. You as an individual person needing what you as that individual person needs. Again, the best thyroid medication is the one that works for you and the combination that works for you and the dose that works for you. So now you're wondering, well, what about reverse T3? When did we figure that out as a test? That came about in 1977. Reverse T3 came about in 1977. However, widespread commercial availability lagged, so RT3 testing remained kind of confined to the research labs. It really wasn't until 1995 that a study evaluated reverse T3 in hospital settings. Now, they termed it unreliable for distinguishing between euthyroid and sick patients. This is what I always say, and this is why mainstream endocrine circles largely dismiss it. If we test a sick patient in the ICU or the ER, illness, injury, whatever it will be, sepsis, fighting for their life. Guess what? Reverse T3 is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful hormone in our body that will go up in those times of disease, illness, tragedy, trauma, injury to say, you know what, at this point in time, the body needs to shuttle its resources to healing this person. They don't need to burn fat. They don't need to grow their hair. They don't need to make major decisions. The body needs to shuttle resources to protect this person. Now, if a person is walking around healthy, for the most part, trying to live life, they're not battling an injury, they're not cut wide open from a car accident, lying in the ICU, and reverse T3 is high, that's when we pay attention and we say, what's happening that this person is in survival mode when they're not in the hospital? Okay, so a 2025 retrospective study of nearly 1,000 patients showed reverse T3 levels high, and they showed the highest reverse T3 levels in those on T4 monotherapy and much lower in those on, ready for it, NDT or T3 containing combinations. I'm going to read that again to you because I want it to sink in. A 2025 retrospective study of nearly 1,000 patients showed the highest reverse T3 levels. It was actually 20.9% in those on T4 monotherapy, and much lower reverse T3 levels in those on NDT or T3 containing combinations. We need reverse T3 and we need NDT so that people don't have to walk around with elevator reverse T3 in a human dormancy syndrome mode. Elevator reverse T3 has also been called human dormancy syndrome, meaning your body is in a hibernation state like that of a bear. Okay, we're going to keep going. Now, if we keep going with T3, that history, 1952, was the discovery that triiodothyronine, T3, is the most biologically active thyroid hormone. In 1956, liothyronine sodium with the brand name Cytomel introduced to the U.S. market. In 1950s and onward, T3 was available both as monotherapy and in combination tablets. There was Liotrix at one point of time that is no longer available that apparently contained T4 and T3 in the synthetic forms. So if we look at the history, we have NDT medication first, actually followed by T4 and T3 separated out, but very, very close together. The last stat I heard was that T3 came first, then T4. But nonetheless, these synthetic forms of T4 and T3 became widely available, and many people were using T3 as well. I don't know exactly when the shift occurred to the medical schools, MDs, DOs, learning that that's all you have to do is test TSH. And if TSH is above the reference range limit, which has changed throughout the decades, then we give T4 only and wish that patient good luck. Now, again, we have to look at clinical practice just to conclude this discussion. Clinical practice, what's occurring, and then what is actually happening in the human population with what we are seeing, how people are feeling, and what this ban could mean for you, and then also what you can do about it. So in clinical practice, I know myself and my colleagues that obviously since this has come out, we've been discussing this ad nauseum, and we've been comparing notes as to what we use in practice. And most of us use what works for that unique individual patient. And we want those choices and those options available. I've heard many stories of actual practitioners stating that they don't have a thyroid and Armour Thyroid is the only thing that worked for them. I have colleagues where Armour Thyroid is the only thing that worked for them. We need those options. So those people, yourself included, who may be optimized on NDT or a combination of NDT and T3 can stay well, can keep your quality of life. Because the reality is that if we change you over from Armour or NP thyroid to T4 and T3, you may or may not do well. I don't know, because everyone is so unique and so individual. We'll try if we're forced. If our hands are forced, we will try to optimize you, but it's going to be a rough road and you shouldn't have to suffer. Now, one step further, as I've already mentioned, this sets a precedent, yes, for the FDA to continue to ban medications and dictate exactly what you take. There is a huge problem between synthetic hormones, as in progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, and bioidentical hormones. Like I already stated, there's not that much of a difference between the biosynth. I mean, there's a difference in how it affects you, but there's not a difference in health consequences. T4 and T3 are completely safe. We get optimized. I'm on T3 only. We have patients optimized on T3 and a little bit of T4 all day long. We don't have anybody on T4 only because that doesn't work. But we do have patients optimized on T4 and T3 in whatever combination and whatever dose that looks like. It could be a little baby dose of T4 and a more macro dose of T3. It could be 50-50. It could be 60-40. But we do have patients optimized on that. What we don't use in practice is synthetic forms of hormones. We don't use progestins. We don't use birth control. We don't use equine estrogens. We use bioidentical hormones. What if those are taken away? What if those are taken away? And I'll take this one step further because this is happening with this FDA ban, is that they're coming after supplements as well. So glandulars. Now, in my Fixer line, I do have Thyroid Glandular by the Fixer. I have another podcast that you can dig for. If you just go into Apple Podcasts or Spotify and you search at the top, the Thyroid Fixer, and you put in what would you put in the search with that? Put in glandulars. You're going to hear my podcast on thyroid glandulars, comparing literally the bovine thyroid glandular supplements to the porcine thyroid glandular medications. They're very, very similar. Although we can't say that there's T4 and T3 in bovine glandular supplements, we know that there is because there's no little guy picking out the T4 and T3 from your supplement after we dry the cow's thyroid gland. Very, very similar. I said that back in the early 2000s when I was working with my mentor, and he had a supplement storefront, and I picked up one of the products and I said, oh, it's a matter of time before the FDA comes in and bans this. I figured it would happen because they would figure out that it's pretty damn close to Armour Thyroid. But actually, they're just wiping them all out in one fell swoop instead. So we don't even have the option of Armour Thyroid. But here's the problem. Again, if the federal government can come in and dictate supplements and pull supplements, what else is next? Years ago, there was talk of the federal government coming in and pulling your vitamin D in supplemental form. That would have been vitamin D3, which is the most accurate form of vitamin D, and forcing you to use a prescription vitamin D2, which is not really biologically available and doesn't do much to raise your levels. And it's usually a 50,000 IU bomb that you take once a week and then expect your body to divvy that out, that 50K out over the course of a week. It's just ridiculous. But there was talk about that. So what else are they going to do? Are they going to force you to get a prescription for every supplement? I don't think you realize the precedent that this sets, the door that this opens, and the catastrophic events that could come of this to your health and to your health freedoms and to your medical freedoms. So I'm going to ask every single one of you listening to this, bombard the FDA with emails. We'll put their email in the show notes. Bombard them. Yes, you are going to get an automated reply. They've already typed it out. Everybody gets the same one. But if there's any chance of them seeing hundreds of thousands of millions of emails bombard their system, let's shut their servers down. Let's do that. That could be fun. And then sign any petition that is floating around. There are 4, maybe 5 different petitions out there right now. We are doing our best to consolidate them. I am working behind the scenes with thought leaders in this space. People like Dr. Amie Myers, Isabella Wentz. We are working to actually bring you real information, keep you updated, and we're working to gather every single practitioner out there to stand together and for our voices to be heard by the federal government to stop this ban. There are companies right now that produce natural desiccated thyroid medication that are in the process of getting approved. However, because that approval process takes 2 to 5 years, they will be outside of the scope of this ban. According to that FDA letter, everything needs to be done in 12 months. The move over has to be done in 12 months. Well, they are not going to get approved in 12 months. They're not. So we are also fighting for a grandfather clause to allow these companies to continue to market their products until the time that they are finally FDA approved with their stamp of approval. These are scary times, bottom line. These are scary times. And once again, if you don't think that this NDT ban matters because you're not taking it, you got to think again. I hope that this has opened your eyes to the possibilities that will come by opening this door to the FDA. The FDA that has allowed food coloring and chemicals in our food, that it's banned in Europe, and they're concerned about your NDT having a little sprinkle of something, something in it. Are you kidding me? That's a whole other podcast. For now, check the show notes, rate the FDA, subscribe to my newsletter as well. We'll put that link in the show notes. I will keep you updated every single week, if not more, on what is going on in this wide world of the NDT ban.